Welcome to this edition's Spotlight Science, where we put leaders in healthcare and biomedicine in the spotlight. This time, it's our great honor and pleasure to host Dr. John Halamka, the president of the Mayo Clinic Platform. At Mayo Clinic, Dr. Halamka leads a portfolio of platform businesses focused on transforming healthcare by leveraging artificial intelligence, connected healthcare devices, and a network of trusted partners. Trained in emergency medicine and medical informatics, Dr. Halamka has been developing and implementing healthcare information strategy and policy for more than 25 years. Prior to his appointment at Mayo Clinic, he was the Chief Information Officer at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Boston, where he served governments, academia, and industry worldwide. He is also a practicing emergency medicine physician. And finally, he and his wife also run a huge animal sanctuary in Massachusetts, actually the largest animal sanctuary in New England, which includes 300 animals, 30 acres of agriculture production, and a cidery. It is a great honor to welcome Dr. Halamka and enjoy the interview. Dr. Halamka, thank you very much for joining us in this interview. It's a real pleasure to have you here.
Well, thanks. Thrilled to be here.
Thank you very much. So we're going to jump on the questions immediately. So we can start first with your background, with your education background and your physician background, actually. So I know you completed your studies in California as well as your residency as an emergency medicine physician there. But I also know that you're very, very interested in technology, AI, and medical informatics. So my question is, have you ever thought of going directly into the tech field without the medical field, or was that the plan from the whole beginning to first do the medical part and then kind of join it with the technology part?
So my entire life, these last 40 years in the industry, have been at what I say are the margins of various professions, right? It's the intersection. And so to me, what's really interesting is exploring how does emerging technology apply to healthcare. And in this way, you're looking at problems from a different perspective. You're looking at solution sets that might change the rules. So my entire life has never been serial. It's always been parallel.
Great. I love it. I love it. And I know you've worked with a lot of pretty notable people, such as Milton Friedman, the Nobel laureate in economics, and Frederick Terman, who's widely regarded as the one of the fathers of the Silicon Valley. So can you maybe share with us from your youth, maybe who left the biggest and longest lasting impression of you and why?
Wow, what a really interesting question. I'm going to answer this in a way that you probably might not expect, and that is my father. My father 9 years ago. And my father was an engineer, a patent attorney. And what he did, which I think was catalytic, is there was always mechanical and electronic parts lying around the house, the soldering guns and the materials to assemble them. And, back in the 70s, you see, you wouldn't know this, you're not young enough. There was such a thing as a free range child. That is, go out and play, we'll see you in a day, try to get some food, right? So if you're a free range child and there is no internet and there is no notion of a screen, but yet you're surrounded by these wonderful components, books, and tools, really the world is just limited by your imagination. So how about this? He gave me the fertile ground that I could plant.
Yeah, that's very well said. I wish many people have that fertile ground to plant on in the future. And that's great to hear that your father, amongst all the people, was one of your biggest inspirations. So that's great to hear. And after you moved from California, I know you moved here to Boston, where I'm located now, and you worked at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center as the Chief Information Officer before you actually moved to the Mayo Clinic. So can you maybe tell us more about what you did at Beth Israel and what were the most notable things that you accomplished while being here?
So imagine it's 1996. So you take you way back then. And you
almost when I was born.
Yeah. So you're given a puzzle. imagine that healthcare is coming together in mergers and acquisitions, and each of those component parts has different IT. Now, one idea would be, I know we'll rip and replace everything. It'll take 5 years, it'll cost $100 million, it'll be great. The other, what if we federate? What if we use this emerging thing called the web? What if we create things that didn't even exist in 1996, like APIs, so that I would be able to leave what I'll call the data in place wrapped with interfaces that I could assemble in real time using the web. So in 1996, my MIT postdoctoral thesis was leveraging the World Wide Web to integrate healthcare. Everyone thought I was insane, right? This is 1996, right? I mean, think about it. The World Wide Web was invented in 1993. By 96, it was a swamp of malfeasance and fraud. Secure sockets was not mature, and there was not in 1996, any assumption this would be mainstream. So my role as the CIO, starting in 1997, was to merge the Beth Israel and the Deaconess, to think about how one could make compute available anywhere, anytime, on anything without significant cost or friction. So that period of time, 96 to say about 2001, was this wild transformation from monolithic or client server to distributed and web. So things that came out of that era at Beth Israel Deaconess were things called CareWeb and Patient Site, and at Harvard Medical School, My Courses, the sort of the management system of Harvard Medical School. So it was an amazing time to be extremely creative, take risks, and it turns out those risks were actually the right answer. Who could have guessed?
Yeah. Have you ever actually met the creator of the World Wide Web, Tim Berners-Lee, maybe?
Oh, absolutely. Right. And so, because Chris he's at MIT with W3C,
Yeah.
we've had many conversations about semantic web and what is that next generation as we think about where the web isn't pages of HTML and HTTP, it's data. And so a lot of those conversations with Tim Berners-Lee led to what I would think is the modern FHIR, or Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources approach to interoperability. We actually start to look at restful transactions between parties of data as that new currency to bring what I'll call liquidity, to information flows in healthcare.
Yeah, cool. And I feel like you're really love the interconnection between medicine and technology here, just from these like first 3-4 questions, which is amazing. I love that too. That like tech part, health tech part, I really love it too. And after your great work here in Boston, you moved to the Mayo Clinic to become the president of the Mayo Clinic Platform. So can you maybe tell us why you moved, what motivated you to move to Mayo Clinic?
Sure. So as I write various articles and books, I talk about 3 enablers for the perfect storm. One is technology. The second is policy, regulatory frameworks. And the third is psychology. So imagine this. I'm going to take a healthcare organization somewhere in the world filled with traditional physicians and say, we're going to go digital first. We're going to build tools for AI augmentation. We're going to create new novel data aggregations that no one has ever done before. You'll find many organizations will say, oh, that's scary. Oh, that's high risk. Oh, that's too expensive. So in August of 2019, John Halamka, the CEO of Mayo Clinic, posted the following job description. Wanted physician engineer with 40 years of digital transformation experience, public policy, economics, international travel, writing and speaking to change healthcare globally, empowered by a strategy that is the fundamental goal of the entire Mayo Clinic for 2030.
Wow.
Who could say no?
Yeah, exactly. Wow, fantastic, just fantastic. And can you maybe tell us how the Mayo Clinic platform actually helps patients in various ways. Can you maybe introduce it to people who are not familiar to it? Can you maybe give some examples that people could understand how applicable the platform actually is?
Well, absolutely. So the idea is at Mayo Clinic, there are 7,000 expert clinicians. And if an expert clinician wakes up and says, I have a new digital idea, I want to deliver this to my patients without a lot of time, cost, or friction. Well, what are the components that a physician is going to need to do that? So let me give you 4 ideas. The first is, I think we all agree, we are now seeing novel kinds of data, right? It's the devices that you carry, it's the devices you wear, it's the devices in your home. The problem is all these data streams are non-standard, and there are a lot of noise amongst the signal. They're hard to deal with continuous high velocity data. First piece, make it trivial to get any kind of data from anyone, anywhere, on any device. And maybe that's cardiology data, your pulse and rhythms. Maybe it's brain data, EEGs. Maybe it's imaging data, retinal scans, right? So it's a whole variety of components to be able to ingest and curate data. Second, you need to assemble that data in a longitudinal patient experience so it's multimodal, right? We don't understand just an episode of care, but we understand what's happened over your life and how over time can we gather different data sources and look at them in a retrospective analysis. Mayo Clinic partnered with Google. Now, Google does not have independent access to Mayo Clinic data. Google's providing storage, compute, and tooling. And we moved 60 petabytes of the entire corpus of Mayo Clinic structured, unstructured, omics, imaging, and telemetry data to a cloud environment, and then layered an AI factory on top of it with de-identification of the data so privacy is protected and it's compliant with all national and international regulations. So the notion here is now a physician says, oh, I can gather novel data types. I've got an AI factory where I can exercise those and create new algorithms, all good. But then how do we know the algorithm is fit for purpose? How do we know if it's biased? How do we know if it's fair? So you need a set of tooling to understand algorithm, local tuning, and validation. So we did that. Final, how do we then deliver the result of those algorithms in workflow to patients, providers, payers, pharmacists, etc. So the platform is a collection of products, often built in joint ventures, collaborations, and partnerships that now enable clinicians to assemble those building blocks into solutions very rapidly.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. I feel like in the future, other hospitals around the world are going to need such a system. Do you agree, or?
Well, in fact, what ideally is Mayo Clinic Platform, it's a platform, right? So that is, it is not meant to just serve Mayo Clinic. It is meant to serve hospitals of the world. So if I can help the care delivery of our arch enemy or competitors, not that we have arch enemies or competitors, right? But that's okay, right? I mean, maybe the analogy is, does Amazon ship products from other companies outside of Amazon?
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah.
Right? So why not Mayo Clinic Platform empower healthcare systems throughout the world?
Yeah, that would be great. And it seemed like so much work has been put into that platform. Can you maybe tell me what were the biggest challenges when you came, like your first day in the job, your first month? What were the biggest challenges you maybe didn't expect to have?
Well, okay. I mean, some of the challenges are informatics challenges that have been unsolved for decades. Let me give you an example. Suppose we're going to de-identify data. And what does HIPAA tell us? Oh, we have to remove name and address, phone number, email address. So great, we've done all that. And now we have a note that says, this leading host of an extraordinary Boston-based, video podcast, right? I think we might agree that wouldn't be de-identified.
Yeah.
Right. So the challenge is complying with HIPAA or the General Data Protection Rules or any other country's privacy framework is not enough. But one has to actually use natural language processing to go through the proper nouns, look at job roles, geographies, familial relationships. And so we did that, right? It took us from roughly April to August of 2020 to go through 10 million longitudinal patient records at Mayo Clinic and do what I call hiding in plain sight. Instead of saying this leading journalist of a podcast at the intersection of healthcare and technology, it might say, oh, this leading reporter writing for the Wall Street Journal or something, right?
Yeah.
That is, the proper nouns are changed in a way that eliminates re-identification, but doesn't necessarily eliminate context.
I
so
see.
That's done, right? That had to be done first. And then, of course, we had to deal with some fascinating international regulations, like something you probably don't know. I'm looking at your last name and see, I'm from Eastern Europe. I'm guessing you might be as well.
Exactly, from Croatia.
Right. So you have to actually understand, the European Union might have certain rules, but do you know the European Economic Area, which includes Iceland and Norway, actually has to comply with the same rules? So we actually had to go into each of our data stores and ensure it was compliant with the regulatory frameworks of an area. Before we can start doing the secondary use in AI development.
Yeah. Seems like a lot of work, but I feel like it's already paying off, and let alone in the future. I feel like this is the future today, basically, what you and your team are creating here, and I'm really amazed by what you're doing. And looking into the future, maybe just a bit, could you maybe single out a factor that would determine the success? What would be the single factor that would determine the success of the platform in 10 years? Would it be, for every other hospital to be on your platform? Would it be to, enhance data privacy as much as possible, or?
Well, of course, yes and yes, but let me actually take it up a notch. This is going to be a very peculiar analogy for you, but hear me out. You might encounter people in society who don't trust vaccinations.
Absolutely.
Now, is that because the science is questionable? Well, I mean, the science is actually pretty robust. I mean, there's a whole lot of things that come into your assessment of an intervention. It could be feelings, right? It could be that thing you saw on YouTube yesterday, right? All kinds of reasons. Well, if we promulgate AI in healthcare, problem, of course, is how do we build trust? How do we build credibility? Do we focus on transparency? How does the algorithm work for a given patient population? Do we focus on explainability, right? Explainability of AI turns out to be pretty important. Or do we say, how about testability? What if your clinician can actually test out an algorithm on 1 million patients like you and says, oh, this is actually pretty useful? So I think success will be building the tooling so that we build credibility around some of these digital health solutions. And that means that patients and providers actually think that there are reasonable tools to adopt. Because to me, adoption and use is our greatest criteria for success.
I can see that totally. And also staying a bit in the future, do you believe telemedicine will become a major part of every physician's day-to-day job, maybe outside the US?
Well, so I do 900 teleconsultations a year personally. And so let me explain why I think the answer is absolutely and unequivocally yes. I am the nation's expert on poisonous mushrooms and plants.
I know.
We're Eastern Europeans, so the challenge is every Eastern European knows what mushrooms to eat and not, but in the US, not so much. So if I'm the only person in the United States who's a board-certified emergency physician toxicologist with mushroom and plant knowledge, don't you want to interact with me virtually?
Yeah, exactly.
And the answer is every poison control center in the country does. And it's because I can democratize access to specialty knowledge and deliver that care anywhere to anyone at low cost. And that's what all of us want, right? We want frictionless care that is high quality and safety at the right time in the right place. And that's what our virtual care systems will deliver. And Mayo is focused on high acuity, serious and complex care. And our innovation over this time of COVID has been hospitalizing patients in their homes so that we can give them Mayo Clinic quality care anywhere.
Yeah, yeah, and what you said, in order to provide that frictionless care, do you think maybe that some additional education is needed for physicians, or are they just ready to go into telemedicine, or do you think maybe some courses or something is needed for them to provide the optimal care through telemedicine?
So here's my prediction. There's a thing called a hospitalist, and that is a physician trained beyond medical school and residency, but to optimally deliver care to inpatients in a hospital setting. I will argue we will see a new specialty, the virtualist, right? And so as I am interacting with you over a Zoom platform, and I should be able to look at the way you speak, the way you move, your skin pallor, right? I should be able to make some assessments that has nothing to do with my emergency medicine training because I'm a virtualist.
Yeah.
And I should also be, this is sort of a silly point, but I cannot palpate your right lower quadrant to assess for appendicitis right now. But you know what? I can actually tell you, measure the line between your belly button and your hip and put 1/3, of the way as hard as you can. Does it hurt? Right? And so that again is an example of what a virtualist would be trained to do that a standard, say, hospitalist wouldn't know how to do a physical exam over Zoom.
And I like, so many people currently are talking about the metaverse. You've probably heard of that. So do you think the metaverse will help in some way deliver telemedicine?
I think we have to be careful. So one of the passions that I have today is what I call guardrails and guidelines around the use of AI and virtual care. We have to be careful, right? So that as a physician, I practice medicine. Now think about that word, practice.
Yeah.
It's based on a whole lot of experience, a whole lot of intuition, combining science and best practice and peer advice. And do I believe every algorithm? Do I believe every article? The answer is, of course I don't. And it's judgment, right? So you worry that with the metaverse, unless there are guardrails and guidelines, a physician will pop on the goggles and say, the computer said, and therefore the computer's smarter than me, I will believe it. That is probably not right. It's humans augmented with tools, but humans able to assess the validity of the recommendations.
I agree. But overall, it is really an exciting future, but we have to be cautious, what you said, with it, but really, really exciting. And back to maybe your day-to-day life. I think people may be interested in your day-to-day life. So maybe how do you balance professional life with personal life, since you have a really, really high ranking function? Do you have maybe time to do something in private life, such as maybe your animal sanctuary?
Right. Well, so look at it this way. There are 168 hours in a week, and you just have to use them wisely. And I don't see some sort of sharp demarcation between life and work. And this is to say, like, I just exist, right? And so my day may be, get up at 4:30 and go work with the cows and the horses and the pigs and the chickens and the donkeys, doing some medical care, or, I'll do electrical, I'll do plumbing, I'll do carpentry, right? So my physician's hands are slightly dinged up a bit.
I can see that.
Yeah. And then, I'll go do, 2 hours of intense leadership, or 2 hours of intense discussion on an area of technological advancement. And then I've got half an hour free, and I'm going to go pick up vegetables and stale bread from a local market that we will then feed to the pigs, right? It's like this continuum, right? And so it does, I will tell you, require a fair amount of triage, right? as an emergency physician, you learn what to ignore, what to focus on, what to do first, second, and third. So how about this? Living things always come first, whether that's a human or an animal, and infrastructure comes second. But without solid infrastructure, you're not able to sustain the scale of, I have 300 animals, 500 volunteers, 22 barns on 100 acres. So maybe the secret in all this is know where to focus, know how to prioritize, and build good infrastructure so you can scale your efforts as a single human.
Yeah, that's some great advice. And just staying with the animal sanctuary, because I think that's pretty unique. So have you always had a passion for animals, or is this just that happened coincidentally, basically, the animal sanctuary?
So my wife was diagnosed with stage 3A breast cancer in December of 2011. She's completely fine today. But in 2012, I really want to give back to the community. So what happens in a startup? Well, you start in one direction, you pivot, you evolve, you never know where it's going to lead. In 2012, we started with a few chickens, ducks, geese, guinea fowl. And then we said, oh, hey, there's some alpaca to rescue. And then the community said, oh, you're a large animal sanctuary? We've got a horse. And before you know it, we evolved to become the largest animal sanctuary in New England. So it's a bit like Mayo Clinic says, start small, think big, move fast. And so today, Unity Farm Sanctuary is what I call a community benefits startup. Who knew that although we're rescuing animals and giving them lifetime homes, one of the real purposes is we're rescuing people.
Yeah.
In a time of COVID, can you imagine the therapeutic benefit of walking a donkey, grooming, hugging a cow?
Yeah.
Which is we have the young, we have the old, we have the disabled, we have the autistic, we have programs in meditation, Tai Chi. Every day, we're impacting hundreds of people in the community. And Unity Farm Sanctuary is an interesting place because it's become a retreat for the greater Boston area.
Yeah, it's great. Maybe one day I visit it. You never know. Maybe I give you an animal. So
anytime, come on by.
Perfect. Great. And we're almost at the end of the interview, 30-minute interview. It was great talking to you. And just because we have an audience of many medical students, young medical students, who are really interested in basically the medicine of the future. So do you think maybe during medical school, the curriculums are going to change significantly in the future to adapt to this digital medicine of the future? Or do you still think the curriculums are going to stay the way they are now?
Well, let me ask you a rhetorical question. Did you have to study the Krebs cycle?
Yeah, I see.
Okay, and so the point being, why? Right? I mean, you'll never use it.
I know.
Yeah, but did you learn Python? Were you taught data science?
No, I did not. No.
Right, so the answer is, let's stop teaching this historical data that hasn't changed since Osler. Yeah. And let's turn our medical students into data scientists who, if they're not Python programmers, I mean, they don't have to be. They can at least understand what algorithm they should use or not, or the difference between population health and individual care. So I think the curriculum has to radically change to enable the clinician of the future.
Yeah, I really hope it does. And I really hope many medical students hear this because I feel like 99.9% are going to agree with everything you said here, including me.
Yeah.
So yeah. Cool. And for the end of the interview, just a few quick fire questions. So short questions, short answers. So the first one, your role model, I think you answered. It was your father, right? Would you say?
Correct.
Perfect.
Right.
Second one, the best advice you were given.
Work on the margins. You've already heard me say this. Don't become a biochemist. Become a biochemist who works in materials science and creates new prosthetics, right? Work on the margins.
Yeah. The most important skill you learned as a leader in healthcare.
What data to ignore.
I knew I sensed that you were going to say that. Yeah.
See, the difference between a novice and an expert is an expert knows what to ignore.
Yeah. And the most important skill you think any young physicians should learn, basically, and not regarding like medical skills, some other maybe skill.
Each of us has at least 5 careers in us. Take a risk. I mean, every day I navigate without a map. I don't know where it's all going to lead, but I have a feeling that some of these things we've talked about will actually make a difference. Yeah. So take a risk, make a difference.
Yeah. And the last one, maybe the best one, Mayo Clinic or Harvard?
Well, I have to answer that temporally. I think Harvard was the best place to be from, say, 1996 to 2015, and that Mayo Clinic, because of a culture and an urgency to change, is the right place to be now.
Perfect. And with that great answer, we're basically done with the interview. Dr. Halamka, it was such a pleasure. Enjoyed talking to you. I hope you had a great time too.
Well, absolutely. So be well. And remember, my role as a nearly 60-year-old person is to mentor those who will replace me. So anything I can do to help, I'm always here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.